library friends. This is Kimberly, and I cannot wait to show you how to make these itty bitty tiny quilt magnets. They come out to be about 1.5 inches. This one I hand stitched and hand quilted the top, and then this one was all by sewing machine. This one, the magnet stuck with tacky glue easily. You can use hot glue on the back of the fleece, which is how we're going to do it. If you want a different backing, you can add extra fabric to the back before you quilt through the sewing machine. Okay, so let's get started by taking the 4 pieces of fabric from your kit. And I'm going to show you that I have already drawn lines on the solid pieces for you by using a 1/4 inch type ruler. It has a nice point on it for the corners. And then it's got this middle line. That middle line is the line you're going to cut. And the outer lines are the lines you're going to sew. And I'm going to show you a really nice way to sew those together. One thing is you want to have your design piece of paper up, and you want to have your solid with the lines on top of that. Okay, you're not going to be able to see the design of the fabric on the back. If you did do it the wrong way, like say you put the design down and then you put this on top to sew, you wouldn't be able to see the design after we cut and we were to fold back our pieces of fabric. So we want to make sure that that design is up. And it's not going to matter what angle, depending on your print, what way it goes. Also, what you need to know about the lines that were drawn, I suppose you could use a Sharpie. I used my favorite, it's a friction pen, because it's erasable. Isn't that awesome? So this is erasable either by using the eraser on it. It's a little more work and it stretches out the fabric, or you can use your hot iron. So try to keep the fabric pieces away from heat before you get to sew on them, okay? And this is going to be invisible after you sew and assemble your pieces, so you don't really need to iron out these lines. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to sew these 2 pieces together. I already have one line sewn, and I want to show you a nice way. You don't need to have your stitches be itty bitty. They can be a little longer stitched. I'm going to show you what to do though that'll be really quick, so that you are not sewing super tiny itty bitty stitches to make it seem like a strong seam. Okay, so I already went through, did my one line, and now I'm going to do the other line. So don't sew that middle line. The middle line you're going to ignore for now. So I'm just going to do like a running stitch, and I'm just going to start gathering pieces onto the needle. It doesn't matter how long your gaps are. I'm not going to be perfect. I just want to try to keep the needle on my sewing line. And I'm just going to tuck it. And you could probably get the whole piece of fabric on. You can do any size square for these as well. The smaller, I'm sure, the quicker they'll sew up. Okay, so you see the gaps in my stitches. And now we have a way of going back to fill in the gaps really quick, like pretty much the same way we just did it. I'm gonna go over to my little edge though, so that I come up from the bottom. So I'm gonna come up from the bottom where the end of this stitch is, like right there, okay? And then what's gonna happen is when I come up, I'm gonna go to the next stitch right there and go down. And then I'm gonna pull it up through here and push it down through there, okay? All right. I'm gonna go down, remember? And I'm going to come up, and I'm going to go ahead and start doing this pretty the same way that I did with my other direction. I just want to get it as close to that as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and start gathering on my needle. I'm going to go down and then up. Oops. And then down. And then up. Down. Up. These are not going to be totally perfectly straight stitches like if you did a sewing machine, but it should be good enough that you probably won't really notice. Alright, so now I'm pulling through gently. If I pulled too hard, if I tugged too hard, it would cause some gathering, which we don't want. Alright, so these are done. I'm going to give it a tie in the back, a little knot, and then I'm going to cut. You can use a rotary cutter if you naturally sew, or I can show you what to do with big scissors. I have these giant scissors. It would fit the whole way, but I'm probably gonna take my time. Okay, now you would iron these to set the seam and to press them with a hot iron, but you don't have to use a hot iron. I can show you a finger press way too. Have your solid be on the top because we want the seam to face the solid for both pieces. Okay, so I'm finger pressing right now. One thing you can use that I learned a long time ago by an awesome quilter was you could use a clothespin, a wooden clothespin, the ones with the metal hinges, and take it apart and then make sure there's no metal on it, and then you can take the head of it and you could press it down. So this just helps it make it lay a little flat. Okay, I used a color thread so you guys can see it. It doesn't matter what color thread you use, but if you do have lighter fabric and use darker thread, you'll probably see through it. Like through the fabric, you might see it through there. Also, if you were to like iron too hard and like stretch your fabrics and press too hard, you would see some of the stitches come through as well. So you don't want to tug and distort. You just want to make it a little even. So we have these tails now that we can just trim. Just lob right off with your scissors. Okay. Right. Okay, so now I've got those corners cut off. We're going to sandwich these together. We want to have the design put on top of the solid. And these seams are now going opposite directions, so it'll help us be able to nest these seams together. They'll like lock together and hopefully give us that nice point. So you just lightly try to slide them in, like wiggle them a little bit back and forth, and those seams should be keeping them pretty well in place. And then I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner, opposite direction of that seam, to get this crisscross look. Let's see, so I am going to use that quilter's magnet, or quilter's ruler magnet, to draw that line. And then I'm going to show you how to draw a 1/4 inch on both sides of that line so that you know how far away to sew and then cut. cut. The middle line, this line I'm drawing, that's the cut line. Okay, so I have to add a quarter to both sides of this line. This ruler's got that 1/4 inch, super easy to add as long as I line it up with that line I just drew. I can go ahead and draw. Okay, and now I'm gonna twist it a little and draw the other line on. I don't know, I kind of have a bad feeling about my block. See how it turns out when I sew it. Okay, so we're just gonna sew it pretty much the exact same way we did when we sewed at the beginning. So I'm gonna do those like running stitches. And for that gathering, you basically are holding your needle and you're maneuvering the fabric with the other hand. I mean, you will move your needle just a little bit, but you're guiding your fabric a little more with the hand that doesn't have the needle in it. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna pull through. And I'm gonna go back the other way. I'm gonna do that on the other side, and then we'll meet back and we will cut our squares and see how the points turn out. Well, you know what? I just did that one side. So let's take a peek and see if we can, before I go and sew both sides, because that would be a little bit of a waste of time. So we can take a peek and see if there's going to be a nice, looks like there's going to be a very nice matched corner. Very rare for me, but that's great. So this, hey, if I can do this, you guys can. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sew the other side. Try to keep it as straight as possible on my line. Okay. You know, actually, when you are going to finger press after opening this mini quilt block, you want to do an open seam so that when you do sew it onto your piece of felt, it won't be too bulky when you're hand stitching along whatever design you do. And you'll see this little pinwheel when you open the seam. It just makes it lay flatter too. So this is where we would do some top stitching or hand quilting. I wish I knew what to call it. I have just taken, you can take some embroidery thread, and I doubled up one piece of thread. It feels a little fine, that's okay. And then, okay, so I should show you my first one that I hand stitched. I eyed it and it looks like a hot mess to me. I didn't measure from both sides of my seam evenly. My stitches definitely not even, so not too great. Yeah, so I learned my lesson, and then I ended up using my ruler and I measured from each side of my seam. This is really small, so it seems like a big gap. I didn't have to do 1/4 inch. I probably could have done half of that, done like an 1/8 of an inch. But also, you don't even have to do this type of stitching. This has an argyle look to it. You can do like any type of stitch you want on the seam, or you can echo the seam going down. The way I did it with the sewing machine was just echoed, and it just looks very fine stitched. It doesn't look very quilted to me. So this one has a couple of threads per stitch, maybe 2, maybe 3, and it is embroidery floss for this one. I am not using embroidery floss for this, and I think because it's got a crisscross design, I think I'm gonna go ahead and do little X's all the way down the seams for this. And then when you do around the perimeter of your little block, that's how you're gonna sew away the felt. So you're gonna want to make sure it's about, I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch probably, so that when you do cut it, I used pinking shears for this scalloped edge. You don't want to cut on that because it kind of sets the fabric down, so it wouldn't be able to come undone. It'll still allow a little bit of fraying, but these are going to be like decor. You're not going to be handling them every day maybe. So I think for my crosses, I'm probably going to like go down one direction and then go back the other direction. So this could take a while, but I think I'm going to make really tiny stitches. And I'm just using off green. I don't know if it'll be invisible on the screen or not. Yeah, I think it'll probably show up. All right, so I'm just gonna eye it. I'm not gonna measure anything. So it'll have a very ultra handmade look, but that's okay. Some people like it, and that's okay. And so I'm just gonna do this all the way down, and then I'll come back and show you the rest of the crisscross. Okay, so I already went up one direction. Now I'm going to be going the other direction. To make my crosses. Okay, and after I finish these, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now that I have finished the crosses on both directions, I'm going to sew a simple stitch about maybe 1/8 around the edge. And that will help it from fraying when I go to trim with scissors to cut it off with the felts. So I am just gonna wing it with my stitches. So here we are, done, stitched onto the felt. I could go ahead and cut them off with these big scissors. It would just be a straight edge, or I could do pinking shears, which would give these scalloped edges. So I'll just show you what it's like with just the straight edge. I'm going to cut kind of close to the edge. These will still fray a little bit, but that's what this running stitch is going to keep it from doing, from fraying too much. All right, and then I would just go ahead and take my tacky glue and magnet and stitch them on the back, or glue it on the back. We are done stitching for now. One thing you could do before you put that magnet on is you could sew a button on it. I sewed it on, but you could even hot glue it on, maybe even use the tacky glue for that. If you think that you would like to make a lot of these at once, maybe for gifts, or you just really like to make a lot of them, instead of cutting out all of the squares individually, which can be time consuming, there is mini charm packs, and they have about 40 pieces of fabric in them, and they're 2.5-inch squares, just like what you used for making your magnets. They are pretty much color coordinated, and they also have doubles sometimes, so you could make a couple of matching ones, or you could just combine the designs, and you don't have to use a solid. It's just a easy way to show you guys how to make these. All right, so you have made them. I hope you enjoyed making them, and I cannot wait to see your finished projects. So please email them to me if you'd like. I'm not saying you have to. My email address is kpatton, KPATTON, at Shorewood-Troy And if you have any questions as well, go ahead and email those to me. I will try to answer them, or I will be able to find more resources for you and send them along your way that will help you, especially if there was something that I did not show you how to do well enough. But I hope you really enjoyed making these. And also, I would love to know if you have any other things that you want to learn to sew. Preferably hand stitching. That is a lot easier for me to show you guys than using the sewing machine. And small things as well, that would be great. So if you ever see anything and you'd like a tutorial for that, and kit it up for a program, I would be pretty happy to do that for you. So just show them to me in my email. Thank you so much, you guys.